Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In Surah Baqarah verse 27, Allah says, الَّذِينَ يَنْقُضُونَ عَهْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مِيثَاقِهِ وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَنْ يُوصَلَ وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. And the translation of this verse is, those who break the covenant of Allah after contracting it and sever that which Allah has ordered to be joined and cause corruption on earth, it is those who are the losers. Now, being able to say no to someone is a huge problem for many people. On the one hand, they are told to value their self-respect and self-esteem, which means that if someone is asking them to do something which they find too difficult, they need to politely refuse, learning to value themselves. But then on the other hand, they are told to go out of their way for other people, otherwise Allah will be angry with them and it might cost them their akhirah. Their elders quote so many verses of the Quran and references of hadith that convince them that even if it is difficult for them and they know that they are being taken for granted and they will not be respected for their efforts, they must still go out of their way. Now, naturally, such people eventually lose their self-respect and self-worth. So what do we do? This verse of Surah Baqarah explains this situation beautifully. In this verse, Allah is referring to those who are going to be losers on the Day of Judgment. They are those who break Allah's covenant. Now, what does Allah's covenant mean? It means Tawheed. Then it says, they are also those who break what Allah has ordered to be joined. Now, what is this? Relationships between relatives, friends, neighbors, in-laws, children, spouse, parents, siblings, orphans, and the poor, and so on. All of these are relationships that Allah has ordered to be joined. As we live in a community, we have many relationships that we are involved in, and Allah orders us to look after all these relationships. But He also mentions a very important detail after this. Losers are those who break these relationships and spread fasad. Now, what that means is that they are breaking relationships because they want to take revenge. They want to hurt the other person. They might want the other person to suffer, or it might be because of ego and jealousy that they just don't want to offer any help. All these things follow under the domain of spreading mischief or spreading fasad. In other words, the person chooses to keep a distance or to avoid other people simply because of ego, pride, or jealousy, and that is wrong. But at no point does Allah mention that if a relative or friend or family member is toxic, very demanding, very unappreciative of your efforts, keeps expecting more from you, then you should still keep giving. In that case, it is important to say no and set healthy boundaries. So if someone is repeatedly asking you for a favor and it is too exhausting for you, or you are just not comfortable doing what is being asked of you, then you need to learn to say no. But then we can ask, what if we start to feel guilty because those people hate us now? Or they will say bad things about us to other people? Or what if those people scare us by telling us that Allah will now be angry with us and bad things will start to happen to us simply because we said no? How do we know that we are doing the right thing by saying no? Well, the answer to that is very simple. The first thing that Allah mentions in this verse is that we should not break the covenant we signed with Him, meaning our relationship with Allah comes first, and everything else comes after that. Tawheed comes first. So if you are scared of saying no, just because you fear that the other person will hate you, then perhaps you might be worshipping that person, which is a violation of Tawheed Ibadah. We should only worship Allah. If you are scared of saying no because you fear that Allah will punish you, even though you know in your heart that you want to say no because you are exhausted, not because you want to spread fasad, then even thinking something like that about Allah is a violation of Tawheed. It's a violation of Tawheed Asma wa Sifat. Why? Because how can you possibly think that Allah is so unjust that He would want you to exhaust yourself pleasing people who are genuinely ungrateful? How could you possibly think that Allah would curse you just because you said no to someone who keeps taking you for granted and doesn't show you any respect? People can be unjust, people can be unfair, but not Allah. His quality is that He is the most just. Similarly, if you fear saying no because you are afraid that the other person controls your risk and they might stop helping you or they might stop giving you money, then that is a violation of Tawheed Rububiyyah, which teaches us that all risk comes from Allah. He is the protector, He is the guardian, sustainer, and He is the Lord of all. So don't let Iblis or other people fool you. It's okay to say no if you're saying it for the right reasons. On the other hand, if you're too scared to say no, then you might actually be violating Tawheed. Assalamu alaikum.